how that building's leased up. What kind of tenants do you have? Do you have government tenants? Do you have, healthcare tenants? Do you have financial tenants? So many different things come into play. The authority having jurisdiction, LA is completely different than San Diego, is completely different than Orange County. So we're just kind of dealing with that in a microcosm of ourselves. It's like we have all these different, rules and regulations that we have to adhere to. And we're just, within 120 miles of each other, those 3 counties.
Right, and it's my understanding that you're part of that global task force that Hines has put together to kind of come up with a plan that fits across the organization. But I assume that starts at a very maybe 100,000 feet overview and then scales way down to the local level, to where you have to have something in place that provides some sort of guidelines across the portfolio, and then scale it down and give kind of a top-down approach. Is, hey, look, this is what we're going to do throughout our portfolio, and then we need to scale. You need to have the authority to make your own rules and regulations at your individual properties or on a county-by-county basis, etc.
Yeah, definitely. Hines has done a fantastic job of putting together, panels of really smart people, bringing some, doctors and immunologists and, all these people to weigh in on this document that we create. And like we said, it's a living document. So we do have a pretty all-inclusive start or platform, but how you jump off that diving board into your own pool is going to look different for every building.
Right. See. And David, is that similar to how you all are approaching things from a building by building standpoint, or how are things looking over at the university from that standpoint?
It definitely is. There's when you got varying ages of buildings, that really compounds how you need to approach as far as getting it ready for come back to work. We're looking to organizations like ASHRAE to give us guidance on what to do relative to your air handling equipment. And one of the recommendations is do a 2-hour pre-occupancy purge and a 2-hour post-occupancy purge. A lot of our buildings, we're just not capable of doing that, but we would like to bring in as much fresh air as possible. So we're going case by case, building by building, seeing what we can do with our systems, with our cleaning schedules, and how to address the public areas to make them safe. And everyone is unique. You have to create almost an individual plan for each one. And again, there's best practices that's universal, but you have to take those and tweak them case by case.
Absolutely. Ron, I feel like I've been leaving you out. I got on the subject and I had a follow-up question. So anything to add to what David and Doug are stating?
Yes, and also just to echo what they have said and what we have seen in the research is that as we're in a situation where each building is very unique, and so you can't do this. You can't apply a global kind of a prescription or strategy for each build or all your buildings. So that's fair. Each one will have to have its own set of guidelines and strategies to open. The key is, though, and what is I think universally accepted, is that as we start to see the buildings open, and that varies across the world and across North America, across cities. So as these buildings open, the key for every building, whether it's a building owner, whether it's owner managed, operated, if it's a leased building, if it's a public building, how do you ensure and how do you message that this building is as safe as possible as it relates to COVID-19? In other words, whether it's your employees, whether it's the public, your customers, if it's a shopping mall, whether it's contractors that are coming in to work on equipment within the building, deliver packages or whatever, we have to not only have the messaging right, but actually have the building in a state that it is to the best of that, of everyone's abilities to do that. The good news is, and we just had through the CABA Intelligent Buildings Council, a panel of leading experts talk about this, that it came, and your company is a great example of this, Drew, in that we have some of the best technology in the world that unfortunately isn't always utilized by the build sector. There's 6.4 million commercial buildings in Canada, US, and the vast majority do not have what we call intelligent building technologies. And the reality is that if there's maybe a positive, is that the technology that we do have, whether it's for HVAC, security, life safety, for data analytics, for sensors, for thermal imaging, for ultraviolet light to cleanse certain rooms in the evening, those are things that are here today. And maybe we just have to make sure that the builders, developers, facility managers, architects, engineers, and others are aware that there is technology here today that can actually help them make their building as safe as possible for the people that are coming into that building, whether it's employees and whether it's customers or contractors. So that's one of the things that the research is showing. I think the industry understands now. How do we message? And your webinar is a great way of doing that, to show that this that there is a way forward, and we have to be methodical about how we develop that strategy for each building, because each one will be very unique.
Fantastic. And you just touched on two of my questions. One is my immediate next question to David, and that is, I believe that communication, as Ron was saying, communication to building occupants as to the proactive actions that are being taken in advance of people returning is of the utmost importance. Is what actions are you taking today in order to ensure that we have a safe working environment when we return to these buildings? What does that communication look like for your organization?
Yeah, for our campus, from the onset of this crisis, there was almost daily communications coming out of our leadership, and that didn't come out. Some of the communication had to come quickly, so there was times where maybe myself, I was unaware there was decisions that were having to be made, but the follow-up was like, here's why we're making decisions. So now that we got kind of into a pattern where we're kind of more organized of how to focus on the reopening and what's our next steps, the communications relative to our emergency operations command group is developing committees and subcommittees on how to actually go back to whatever is the next step, next phase of occupancy on our campus and operations. And that's being communicated to all levels, and again, to a broad community of occupants. The key component of that is like what was said earlier. People need to feel that confidence that when they're walking into a building, that it is going to be safe for them to come in there and occupy it. There's a lot of factors to that. So communicating how to, well, first and foremost, like for our staff and our folks who are working on campus, what are the expectations for protective gear that you need to be wearing when you enter a building? So we're going to make it a requirement that you have some type of face mask or protection, and in some cases they're going to have to wear gloves. So, and we're going to continue that for in the immediate future and maybe for long term. So it just depends on how far that goes. So I think when folks start returning to our campus, or new students start coming to our campus, when they see our staff are donning protective gear, it's going to give them a little level of confidence that this is important to us, and we're using other practices to make sure our spaces are sanitized. Communications on how we're going to come back to work is really important for my staff. There's a lot of things that's confusing, like what they're going to do when they come back, especially for our staff that need to go back to maintain the equipment, like the PMs or the filter changes that we haven't been doing since buildings have been shut down. What do we do first? Are we going to go to a different type of filter? So the communications of giving them the plan that is the strategy going forward to make our building safe needs to be understood by our workforce. If they don't understand it, then they can exude that same confidence to our occupants and our students on our campus.
Right, and it seems it's not a trivial task, in my opinion. You have to re-educate your staff, and then they need to disseminate that down to the people that are occupying the buildings and basically set a precedence. You know, it's a re-education factor. We've done things this way for so long, and now we have to change the way that we've been doing things. And you have to start there, in my opinion, so that your team has the tools to be successful and to be advocates of this new world that we're living in, to set the precedence.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, we haven't started our phase 1 of return to work, which would be taking our bare minimum critical operations staff and bring in the next level. Well, the next level will be our team leaders and supervisors. And the first thing we're going to do is do training, and training on the expectations so they clearly understand it, to do what you talked about, Drew, is so that they understand it, and the folks that they're leading, they can communicate that effectively to them and also model it.
Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, not much. I mean, he pretty much touched on everything that, you know, we have in place. You know, our communication to our tenants, you know, if we have at one particular campus, you know, 35 tenants, you know, we are going to let them know how we are going to come back and prepare the building, and how we will enter their space, how we will respond to work orders. You know, there's a lot of tweaks now, and PPE is a huge aspect of that. So, and again, it really comes down to, you know, the ownership relationships that we have with these properties, and the authorities having jurisdiction. You know, all these things come into play. You know, you don't want to overreact and you don't want to underreact. You know, you kind of want to be on that razor's edge. But I think in the time that we're in right now, you know, probably taking a more conservative approach is the appropriate way. So, you know, we're putting signage everywhere of, you know, what's safe distance when you're standing for an elevator? How do you stand in an elevator? You know, you put signage in the elevator, on the floors, on the walls. You know, I have to stagger my engineering support for properties to where, you know, thankfully for, you know, great automation systems, I can respond to an HVAC call, you know, remotely. And, you know, I really don't have to go into a tenant space unless there's a flood or there's an electrical problem, you know. And if we have to get in there and respond, you know, there's a certain protocol that we have for our engineers to respond. David mentioned, you know, doing the proper PMs and the filter changes, and, you know, that's going to be a big topic, I think, for a lot of us to deal with, in that, you know, the average person who works in an office doesn't understand MERV 11, MERV 13 HEPA filter, but now there's going to be a lot of information out there, you know. So we like Ron and David said, you kind of use ASHRAE and OSHA as your guidance, you know, and then also you point to the CDC and, you know, the transmission of, you know, COVID, you know, really doesn't go airborne and it can't travel through your HVAC system. And so it's dealing with people's fears, it's communicating properly, and it's doing the right thing to get people back in. It's kind of putting all those things together.
Fantastic. Ron, do you have anything to add to those responses?
They're both, you know, both gentlemen touched on some really key points. And I think that what I can add or reinforce is that best practices is going to be very, very important, and the documentation within the companies. So coming back to what I said earlier, we have a lot of the great technology today, air filtration systems, for example. So the documentation and why that's going to be important, because each jurisdiction is, whether you're in Germany or India or the United States, and so even by country, by state, province, city, the local governments, there will be some very specific regulations, and soon we imagine a flurry of building codes coming at us that will entrench that. That can be a good thing, actually, to help minimize the litigation that is likely to be coming at us as well. So that's a key issue to document in terms of the rules that each building owner, facility manager, those rules should be documented really well and then communicated as well as possible. The second thing in terms of just protection, and this will be interesting to see how this plays out, but invariably we unfortunately will be seeing lawsuits. And so in those lawsuits, how do we again protect ourselves from people that enter into our building and said we didn't do, or as an employee who might contract COVID-19 saying, really as an employer, you didn't do enough to protect me, even though you did a lot of great things. So how do we position ourselves in a way that we can best minimize that situation? And then there's privacy. Privacy is in cybersecurity, which always has been a bit of has been an issue for many years, and now even more so, because privacy goes beyond just things like malware and cybersecurity issues when people are tapping into your data. So privacy, and a great example right now, the airline industry is saying, we're going to take temperature, employees, the passenger's temperature. That could be through just a laser thermometer or thermal imaging. And right away, many groups are saying, wait a minute, that's an intrusion on my privacy. And I don't think you should do that. And so these are issues that each organization will have to understand and decide if they will be taking temperature of a customer walking through the front door of a retail outlet, or do we do that for a contractor that's coming in to do maintenance in our building? So these are things that will have to be looked at. And again, there will be some great guidelines coming from ASHRAE, government bodies, but you should make yourself really aware of that, and then put into practice in terms of documentation, and get some great legal counsel on how that is written up, so that, again, if you get, unfortunately, some of that negative pushback in terms of legal action, you're best protected.
Well, Ron, I feel like you bring up some really excellent points, and I feel as though somebody leaked my questions to you, because that falls right in line with my very next question. Is it's perfect transition as well. Is we live in a reactive world. We react to things that happen, and the aftermath of COVID-19, I think that we're going to see changes in technology, changes in standards, changes in code. What changes do you anticipate? How do you think that we're going to, what are the buildings of the future and the codes and standards look like as a result of what we're going through right now?
It's hard to predict, and because I think we're learning as we're writing the playbook as we go forward. I like a comment was made earlier that certain countries are kind of ahead of North America, and I think there's a lot to learn from actions that are taken there, whether it be in Europe or Asia, to say, what did they do in Shanghai, or what did they do in Germany that seems to really be resonating, be accepted by the builders and developers of that community. So I think we can learn from that. So Doug, you may be very fortunate because of your wide portfolio that you're able to tap into that. The other part, so in terms of codes, we expect clearly that and that actually can be a good thing, because having codes that will address some of the issues in terms of safety and, in terms of what type of indoor air quality. Do we go to the level of filtration that airlines have in a building now? And that may be a good thing. Again, thermal imaging, ultraviolet light, which has been around for quite some time, actually, the healthcare sector. Right now, it's $1 billion industry, according to some research that we just got our hands on, and they expect it to go to 3.4 billion in a very short time. So, I mean, these are technology that is there today, can really help protect people within buildings, and ultimately be very positive. So it's just a matter of I think, I don't know, as Doug or David said this, that that you really have to prioritize. Again, if you look at a building and say, what are the first steps? We can't do everything all at once. So let's work out a roadmap, a strategy, and here are the first 10 steps that we're going to take. And it has to do with budget, has to do with the existing technology you have in the building, has to deal with the type of building you are and the type of people that are in the building. So all of that takes into consideration. But a lot of corporations that I'm aware of are developing task forces. I think you're part of that with the Hines group. And that's a very positive thing, to really get input from different groups. So sometimes that was saying, when you're in the forest, it's tough to see the trees. So you need outside expertise from the medical profession and others that can come in and say, you know what, the buildings of the future are not going to be necessarily the way we're moving in terms of hoteling, teaming, bringing everybody together around a table. That was really nice. In the future, that may not be nice. We may be going back to everybody gets their own office and we can close the door. I'm just saying that things will change, not the least of which hoteling and working from home. That in itself has changed the world forever. Where some companies embraced it and took advantage of it, others did not. This was a worldwide experiment to say, how can we operate working from home? And you don't have no choice. So companies which have never taken advantage of it are now seeing how it works and how it can work. We saw some research that says fully 1% of all employers will actually never bring their employees back. 100%. And then others will be to varying degrees. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic of where we're going and how that will impact on the amount of square footage that we have within our build sector. I think I'll stop there. I got off on a tangent.
Very good points there. David, Doug, do you have anything to add? Let's start with David.
Yeah, the space is kind of in higher education. That's the big elephant in the room right now. So higher education, right, we don't know at this point how many students are going to come back. Number one, if they do come back and they are on campus, how many are actually going to live on campus? So in the United States, there's been an arms race to kind of build in higher education. So I think that we're going to be finding out that we are way, way overbuilt, and that was validated. And just like with the working from home, there's been a realization, yes, we can teach online. There's been an academic resistance to that, and even making, I would say, making fun of those institutions that are 100% online. Now we're realizing that's the reality of maybe our new world. Cal State last evening said all their system campuses are online. And I don't know the size of Cal State, but I guess probably 250,000 students are going to be 100% online this fall. Wow. So what does that mean for campus experience? And if students learn that they can get an education in their pajamas at home, that's just as quality of an education for going to a campus. And maybe they can work and do DoorDash in between classes or whatever. I think it changes everything in higher education. And we're not just the only vertical market that's going to have that draconian type of changes. So we don't know what we don't know. It's just we got to be flexible and adaptable for the future.
Yeah.
Yes, and so does that student that educates from home in their pajamas for 4 years, is that now the expectation that they don't leave for interviews and they just live at home for forever?
It's again, it's what we don't know, and it's going to create a new paradigms for us all, and it's going to create a lot of opportunities. And what's wonderful about America is always about opportunities. And so when we have this disaster here, it's going to create opportunities for people to adapt and improve. When we didn't maybe think about adapting and improving before, but it's forced us to, and say, hey, this is not really as bad as I thought it was. Maybe we can do things a different way. And I think that's the way it's going to affect all market sectors, is how do we do things not so much different, but instead of working smarter, we're going to do things different so that we adapt to the different. That helps us to do things more efficiently and more effectively. And I think it's just going to be how we use buildings, how we produce students, how we produce new workers, how we produce whatever we're doing.
Right. And I think the one blessing in all this, the quarantine, if you will, is people are eager to get out. That's a blessing and a curse. You don't want them out too soon, but long term, I had this conversation. I think the majority of you know our marketing manager, Scott, is, I said, I was a non-traditional college student. I went to school after hours, so worked during the day, did online classes, etc. I said, why would I take and go to school when I can just do everything online? It's much more efficient. However, Scott countered that point with, it's the experience. And that's one that I didn't have, but I lived vicariously through my now wife. She went to LSU and did my fair share of college experience, if you will, probably more than I needed to. But I was able to do that. But I think that life is an experience, and you can't just live your life in your home or in a library. Getting out and living and doing things is something that needs to be done. And I think that's one of the things that you can expect as a part of this, is people are being cooped up, and at some point they're just saying, I've had enough of sitting behind my computer on Zoom webinars with Computrols and their panel of experts, etc. I think they're going to be ready to get back into the workplace and these buildings.
I agree.
Doug, do you have anything to add? I went off on a tangent there. Sorry.
No, actually, sometimes tangents are good. These guys bring up, Ron and David, some amazing things. And I think the biggest thing is, we don't know what we don't know. And so we're going to see how we react to these things. Is there going to be new codes coming out of this? Probably. Our spaces, like in my world, are they going to be designed different? Collaborative space, the majority of our design in our Class A office buildings are not traditional now. They're open concept. There are very few offices, meeting rooms, conference rooms, and open areas.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to change? Probably. Call centers are probably going to be a thing of the past. There's so many things that we just don't know, but we're anticipating that there's going to be a lot of changes. Technologies, great. Ron mentioned UV technology. It's been around for a while. I've been getting bombarded with, people coming to me and wanting to show me the new technology of UV lights, that cover all spectrums, A, B, and C spectrum, whereas typically old UV lights only have one spectrum. Mm-hmm. There's UV light fixtures that are architecturally nice, and you can put them into tenant spaces. So is that going to be a thing for future tenant builds? Probably. It's not just for air handlers anymore. You can put these light fixtures in and, zap a tenant space, kind of like what they do in hospitals, off hours, and supposedly kill a lot of viruses. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what's going to come out of this, but I can definitely say we're going to see some things. What they are, it's hard to say right now.
All excellent points, and get to a point where this will probably be the last question. We'll do Q&A. historically we lived in and I'll focus this one at circle back to Doug. We've lived in a world where we focus a lot of our time and efforts in making buildings more efficient. And now it seems as though COVID-19 is here and we need to kind of throw some of those strategies out of the door in order to create a healthier work environment. Is this something that you're seeing and practicing? It's more focused on creating a safe workspace than what we've historically focused on making it as efficient as possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the goal, is to create an amazing space that people want to be in and have it be as efficient as possible. And we're probably going to be forced to deal with some of these changes that initially probably aren't going to be as efficient. You know, when we speak about filters, that's kind of a huge aspect right there. You know, like I said, the average person doesn't understand the pressure drop as you go up in MERV ratings of filters, and pressure drop, that's energy. How often you change the filters out. What kind of sanitizing are you doing to not just air handler rooms, but now ductwork? You know, there's just a myriad of things that come into play. We're kind of hearing from a lot of people in our industry modified work schedules. So that means running buildings a little bit longer. You know, to split up the shifts. You know, you're going to be running a building, you know, typical lease hours are, you know, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Now it might be 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. with some, you know, weekend times in there.
Right.
So we're working. Yeah.
It's true.
Modifications will require higher cost. And it's going to kind of force us then to look even deeper at, okay, well, how do we do this efficiently? You know.
Sure. Ron, do you have anything to add to that?
No, it's absolutely true. I've seen some numbers and research that they fully expect that there will be buildings that will be running 7 days a week, commercial office buildings that would traditionally be closed for the weekend. And it's just to really split up so you can have more employees, but not as dense in terms of the employee count, as you would have had normally. And that's an impact on running a building 7 days a week and for longer hours each day. So that's an interesting point. It may come up in a question, but I think and of course I have a little bias to intelligent buildings because of the work I do. But I really believe in technology, there's so many great systems out there that would not be deemed, you know, standalone systems that work very, very fine and are very good systems that don't necessarily, every building doesn't have to be a fully intelligent building like the Edge building in Amsterdam or the new McDonald's headquarters in Chicago, which is deemed one of the most intelligent buildings right now in the world. Those are great and iconic buildings, but there is some great technology that's available today that can really help in this situation, and that's where I think your company and others have that, and we need to see make the end users more aware of that, and there's going to be some champions that are going to really help us, I believe, the industry as a whole, and those champions are going to be the governments, you know, federal, state, local, who are going to be saying, yeah, here's some guidelines that we're putting out for businesses and the communities to basically allow and make sure that their employees and the people that come into the buildings, like customers, contractors, and et cetera, would be feel very safe because you're trying to reduce the risk, and that will help the economy. That will help more people moving about, feeling very confident that if they go into the bank or if they go work in an office building or a university, that they are going to be very safe as a student. And we need to do that. That'll help our economy tremendously. So that's one thing. There'll be a great champion coming from that group. And I think the other champions are going to be the buildings, the leaders like the Hines group and others who truly get it and we'll be taking very positive steps, and we'll be the leaders who will then set, in some respects, the benchmarks for other builders, developers, and facility managers to say, all right, we see what they're doing, and we should be doing the same. And I think we have to communicate that. We have to share that information. I think that will be very positive. CABA, our association, is looking very seriously at developing a major research project that will look at how do you reopen commercial buildings in this new world of COVID-19. And I think that will be very, very helpful, I think, to the industry to help understand, steps that they can take to do the right thing.
Ron, I think everybody wants that playbook right now.
Yes.
They don't want to wait for it.
I know if we could just have it ready, we could be a bestseller, I suspect.
You'll be ready for the next pandemic, right?
We'll be all ready for the next one. We'll all be so smart. It may take 100 years, so I'm hoping I'm not around then.
Oh, hopefully. David, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the opportunity for us in the future is that we've been leveraging or discussing probably in this industry, how do you apply data science to what you're doing in the operations? I think that's where you get the both and as far as like making your building safe and making it more efficient. You're going to have to really kind of figure out a way to apply data science to your building operations to really get the most out of the efficiency of it.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Have a couple questions in the chat. First from Luby, and this topic that Ron had brought up is, has anyone spoken to lawyers and about the programs that and the actions that your organizations are putting together and what their feedback has been?
I can answer that from our university. We got staff legal counsel, and they look at everything. And it's come up in our conversations about privacy issues. That's really a very important thing when we start talking about HIPAA laws and you're taking temperatures and those type of things. So enforcing folks who are very, if you want to call them libertarian or independent, that don't want to wear face masks, if you're required, then what do you do? And so I think all of our decisions are being vetted through legal process just to make sure that we're thinking about as wide as a view as possible to help protect the organization and protect the individuals.
Right. I think that's unfortunately the world that we live in is you have to run everything by legal in advance of taking any actions in order to CYA. It's unfortunate, but the case. You may have the very best intentions, however, that might come back to bite you. Doug, do you have anything to add?
No. Everything that we do in just about any industry runs through legal counsel. It's like you had alluded to. It's the type of society we live in now.
Ron?
Well, just that I would imagine that because we're learning and as we go forward, I think even the legal teams are learning as well and trying to understand, what is law, and because it's been entrenched by government or code, and then what is best practice, so that you can stand by. In other words, if you as a company make claims that, hey, we're doing all of this, and this, and you're not, that would be not a very good situation. So you have to make sure that those are things. And so even if legal says these are things we must do now as a company, whether it's the Hines Group or the university, you're actually, that may become priority number 1 as opposed to it was number 20 on the list before. So those are things that I think it's very prudent for all organizations to take a look at that and make sure that they follow, what legal opinions they're getting.
Okay. I have a question here that I'm not sure that anybody's going to be able to answer accurately. With certainly very fluid situation, but the question is, what percentage of occupancy reduction from staff working remotely do you envision over the course of the next 6 to 12 months? I think that's kind of the $1 million question.
Yeah, that, who knows what that's going to be. We're seeing anywhere from 5 to 10% building occupancy right now. Who knows what that's going to jump up to, as what we're living in Orange County and the state of California, as they begin to push us into different stages. We have what our governor has planned out, 4 stages. We're in stage 2 right now. And they just opened up some retail availability with, adhering to certain criteria. Return to office was mentioned in this second round of stage 2. I also just heard this morning driving in that the stay-at-home order possibly is being extended to August with modifications. So like I said, this thing's so fluid, and how we react to that and how that affects our business is going to be just as fluid.
I would just like to add, if I could, because you're absolutely right, Doug, that each jurisdiction, each municipality, city, state, province is going to be very different because of what is being proposed by the governments at the various levels. And then secondly, even if you say, and we've seen this in a number of states now, you can actually say, yes, you can go back to your business. It doesn't mean that the owner or the employee will go back. So that's the other thing, the wild card that nobody really knows, to say, I can open my hairdressing shop, but half my employees won't come back, and maybe my customers won't come back. So because they don't feel safe. So those are situations that make it really difficult to predict. But the research is showing that absolutely this great worldwide experiment of having people work from home because of the situation has opened the eyes to not just the employees who are saying, hey, there's some positives to this. I don't have to do that great commute every morning and night. And there's some downsides, but also from the employers' side, who start to realize that maybe there's some benefit to actually having a portion or some of my staff working either all the time. You mentioned call centers, that I think is going to change dramatically. They've actually done some research, and one piece I saw that it's estimated in North America that having one employee work from home will save an employer over $11,000 annually. So when you start to multiply that by thousands, it starts to add up, along with the auxiliary costs of having an employee at your office. So it's kind of interesting to see how that will play out in the long term.
David, did you have anything to add?
No, all good statements, and I agree with what's been said. There's no way to know. We just have to be flexible and adaptable and trying to make sure that you're moving with the changes. And I think that the organizations who are not able to move with the changes and being nimble with that, they're the ones that's not going to succeed, and they're actually going to fail.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that you make a great point. You have to be nimble. It's a changing world, changing environment. It's extremely fluid situation. Just to echo what has been said is certainly in Doug's situation, I think that the answer to that question varies on a tenant by tenant basis. And from David's standpoint, that varies on a student by student basis. So answering the question is, I think, really exceptionally challenging. I want to thank everybody for attending today, and thank our panelists. I found this to be exceptionally helpful. And again, this will be shared. Now see on your screen, you should be able to see on your screen what Kristen put together. I'll be sharing this along with a recording and a registration link for next week's webinar. Thank you all, and have a fantastic afternoon.